Red Hollow lay stretched beneath a merciless sun, its wooden buildings bleached pale, and its people worn thin by years of hardship. Wind carried dust through the main street like a restless spirit, settling into corners and hearts alike. At the edge of town stood a small church, whitewashed, weather-beaten, and stubbornly upright. Inside it, Marcus Whitfield closed his Bible with careful hands. "Amen," he said quietly. The congregation rose in slow movements, boots scraping the floor. Marcus watched them file past farmers with tired eyes, women holding worry behind polite smiles, children who already knew too much about loss. He nodded, offered blessings, listened to murmured concerns. He had arrived in Red Hollow only 3 months earlier, yet the town already felt heavy on his soul. Outside, shouting shattered the calm. Marcus stepped onto the church porch, just as a horse thundered into the street. Dust exploded beneath its hooves as the rider pulled hard on the reins. She swung down with practiced ease, boots hitting the ground like a challenge. "Those papers are a lie," the woman shouted, storming toward the land office. "You don't get to steal families off their land because you paid the right people." Marcus had never seen her before, but everyone else seemed to know exactly who she was. Men stiffened. Conversations died. One of the suited agents sneered. "You again, Sabrina Reyes. You're trespassing." "My parents are buried on that land," she shot back, hand resting near the revolver at her hip. "You want to move them too?" The agent scoffed, but unease flickered across his face. Sabrina didn't look like a woman who made empty threats. Marcus felt something stir inside him, tightening in his chest. He had preached about injustice, read scriptures thick with warnings against greed. But this was no parable. This was flesh and blood. "Miss," Marcus called, stepping down from the porch before he could second-guess himself. "Perhaps we can speak calmly." Sabrina turned sharply. Her eyes, dark, sharp, and unyielding, ran over him, taking in his simple coat, his clerical collar. The Bible still in his hand. "And who are you supposed to be?" she asked. "Marcus Whitfield, the preacher." A few townsfolk gasped softly, as if expecting lightning to strike him down for interfering. Sabrina let out a dry laugh. "A preacher defending stolen land. That's new." "I'm defending people," Marcus replied evenly. "And truth." The agent scowled. "This doesn't concern you, Reverend." "It concerns anyone with a conscience," Marcus said. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Sabrina tipped her hat, slightly not in gratitude, but acknowledgement. "Careful," she said under her breath as she passed him. "Standing between wolves and their prize gets men killed." She returned to her horse, mounting with fluid grace. As she rode away, Marcus realized his hands were shaking, not with fear, but with certainty. This town was wounded, and God had placed him here for a reason. An older woman approached him, eyes wide. "That's Sabrina Reyes," she whispered. "They call her a rebel. Best not get mixed up with her trouble." Marcus watched the dust settle where Sabrina had been. "Trouble," he said softly, "is often where healing begins." Inside his chest, faith and fear wrestled. He had come to Red Hollow to save souls. He was beginning to understand that saving souls sometimes meant standing in the line of fire. And somewhere down that sunburned road, a fierce woman rode, unaware that her path and his had just crossed in a way that would change them both forever. By the following week, Marcus Whitfield had learned that Red Hollow ran on silence as much as dust. Folk spoke softly about the land seizures, if at all, and never by name. Ranchers with wide hats and wider influence passed through town like kings, while families packed up generations of memories under the watch of armed men. Each night, Marcus prayed longer than the last, asking God not only for guidance, but courage. Sabrina Reyes remained impossible to ignore. Marcus heard her before he saw her. Raised voices near the sheriff's office. The scrape of boots, the unmistakable tension of a confrontation about to turn violent. When he arrived, Sabrina stood with her arms crossed, jaw tight, facing Sheriff Cole and 2 deputies. You can't jail a man for refusing to leave his own home, she said coldly. I can, when the papers say otherwise, the sheriff replied. The papers are forged. Prove it. Marcus stepped forward. Sheriff, he said calmly, the man in question hasn't broken any law. Sabrina shot him a warning look. I didn't ask for help. I know, Marcus replied, eyes never leaving the sheriff. But justice doesn't ask permission. The sheriff exhaled sharply, irritated by the growing crowd. After a long pause, he waved his hand. Let him go, for now. As the deputies retreated, Sabrina turned on Marcus. You're either brave or foolish, she said. Haven't decided which. Maybe both, Marcus answered. But I meant what I said. She studied him longer than before, searching for cracks, for fear, for pretense. Why? She asked. Men like you usually stay behind pulpits. Because I preach the word, Marcus said. And the word demands action. That unsettled her more than anger would have. Over the next days, Sabrina appeared often, sometimes arguing in the street, sometimes standing guard as families packed wagons, sometimes riding alone along the edge of town like a restless shadow. Marcus found himself watching for her without meaning to. One afternoon, she showed up at the church unexpectedly. Blood darkened her sleeve, though she stood tall as ever. Sit, Marcus said gently, already reaching for clean cloth and water. I'm fine, she insisted, but she sat anyway. As he cleaned the shallow cut on her arm, silence stretched between them. You don't ask many questions, she said. People tell the truth when they're ready, Marcus replied. She let out a breath. My parents fought these men once, she said quietly. They lost. I won't. Marcus tied the bandage carefully. Then, you shouldn't fight alone. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's all I've ever done. That night, Marcus preached a sermon he had been afraid to give about stolen vineyards, false scales, and the cost of righteousness. Some parishioners walked out. Others stayed, eyes burning with something close to hope. The next morning, a note waited on his desk. You're painting a target on your back, preacher. Wolves don't like being named. He folded the paper calmly. Outside, Sabrina waited on horseback. You should leave Red Hollow, she said bluntly. Before they break you. Marcus met her gaze. And leave everyone else behind. Her grip tightened on the reins. You don't belong in this fight. Neither do innocent families losing their land, he said. For the first time, doubt flickered across her fierce expression. Then don't fall behind, she said at last. This war won't be gentle. Marcus nodded. Neither is faith. As she rode off, Marcus understood something new. Their convictions were different, but their purpose was the same. And where those paths collided, nothing would remain unchanged. Red Hollow changed once the sun went down. By day, the town pretended at peace, miles thin as paper, business conducted with forced civility. By night, fear crept openly through the streets. Riders moved without lanterns. Doors were barred earlier. Dogs barked at shadows that did not retreat. Marcus felt it in his bones. The threats became less subtle. A stone shattered the church window during evening prayer. A crude message was carved into the door of the parsonage. Preach elsewhere. Marcus repaired the damage himself, refusing to involve the sheriff. Silence, he knew, was what his enemies wanted him to choose. Sabrina did not choose silence. They're testing you, she said, one evening, standing in the doorway of the church with her arms crossed, seeing how far they can push. I won't stop speaking, Marcus replied calmly. That's not what I meant, she said. They're deciding when to hurt you. Marcus met her gaze. I trust God. Sabrina scoffed. God won't stop a bullet. No, Marcus said. But he might give me the strength to face one. That answer stayed with her longer than she wanted. The land seizures escalated. Armed men arrived at farms after dark, escorting families out with threats and torches. One barn burned so brightly it lit the hills for miles. Marcus stood with the displaced families, praying with them in the dirt, while Sabrina and a few others kept watch. One night, Marcus walked home alone after visiting a sick parishioner. The road was quiet, too quiet. He heard footsteps behind him, then a shove that sent him sprawling into the dust. A boot pressed into his back. "You like sermons, preacher," a voice snarled. "Here's one for you." Before the blow fell, a gunshot cracked the night. The weight vanished. Marcus rolled over to see two men running into the darkness. Sabrina stood between him and the road, revolver smoking. "You're terrible at staying alive," she said, offering him her hand. He took it. "I was hoping you'd say that." They didn't return to town. Instead, Sabrina led him into the hills, to a narrow canyon where moonlight barely reached the ground. They built a small fire and sat in the quiet danger, lingering like a third presence. "You could leave," Sabrina said, staring into the flames. "No one would blame you." Marcus shook his head. "If I leave now, everything I've preached becomes a lie." She exhaled slowly. "My father believed that too. They beat him until he couldn't stand." Marcus's voice softened. "And did that end the fight?" "No," she admitted. "It started mine." They sat shoulder to shoulder, closer than either expected. The canyon walls held their words, their breaths, their fears. "You're not weak," Sabrina said suddenly. "Just different." "And you're not reckless," Marcus replied. "You're brave." She rested her head against his shoulder before she could stop herself. He did not move away. In that fragile moment, something shifted. Not peace, but resolve. When dawn broke, they returned to Red Hollow together. The wolves had drawn blood, and neither the preacher nor the rebel intended to back down. Red Hollow reached a breaking point when the Ortega family was ordered out at dawn. Wagons stood half-packed, children clinging to their mothers' skirts, while armed men waited with folded papers and cold eyes. Word spread fast, and by sunrise, townsfolk gathered quiet at first, then restless. Marcus stood at the front. "This land has known their footsteps for 40 years, he said, voice carrying over the crowd. "You cannot erase roots with ink and guns." A murmur rippled through the people. Fear wavered. Sabrina stood beside him, revolver visible, daring anyone to try her. One of the ranch agents laughed. "Step aside, preacher, or step into the dirt." Marcus did not move. That was when fists flew. Marcus barely felt the first blow. The second knocked him to his knees. The crowd screamed as chaos erupted. Sabrina fired into the air, shouting for people to back away, but more men surged forward. She fought like a storm-fast, ruthless, unyielding. Still, there were too many. By the time the sheriff arrived, blood stained the dust. Marcus lay barely conscious, and Sabrina was dragged back, a rifle but striking her shoulder hard enough to send her down. The ranchers retreated that night, but they left damage behind. Marcus woke in the church, days later, ribs wrapped, head throbbing. Sabrina sat nearby, arm in a sling, eyes dark with fury and guilt. "I failed," she said quietly. Marcus managed a weak smile. "No, you stood." Word of the violence traveled beyond Red Hollow. Journalists arrived. Officials asked questions. The land barons, exposed, began to retreat not from conscience, but from scrutiny. The seizures slowed. As Marcus healed, Sabrina stayed close, restless but watchful. She helped families return. She listened when Marcus preached again, this time to a church filled to the walls. "You changed them," she said one evening. "We changed them," he corrected. She hesitated, then spoke the truth. She had fought hardest. "I don't know how to live without fighting." Marcus reached for her hand. "Then fight for something new." Her grip tightened. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Red Hollow was still scarred but no longer silent. And love, stubborn and unexpected, had taken root in defiant soil. Spring came to Red Hollow softly, as if unsure it was welcome. Wildflowers pushed through cracked earth, and the wind carried something unfamiliar. Hope. The land seizures did not end all at once, but they slowed, then stalled. Deeds were challenged. Judges changed their tone. The ranchers, once bold, now kept their distance. Marcus stood at the church door one Sunday morning, greeting people with a bruised smile. His body still ached, but his spirit felt steadier than it ever had. The pews were full families, who had once been too afraid to be seen, now sitting shoulder to shoulder. Sabrina stood at the back, arms folded, hat low. She never stayed for the whole sermon, but she always came. Marcus preached that day without fire or fury. He spoke of endurance, of seeds planted in hard ground, of love that shows up even when the cost is high. Afterward, he found Sabrina outside, watching children run through the yard. "You sound different," she said. "So, do you," he replied. She smirked. "Guess we've both been changed." They walked together, toward the hills, where fences were being rebuilt, and land reclaimed, piece by piece. The fight wasn't over, but it no longer felt hopeless. "I used to think faith was weakness," Sabrina said quietly. "Waiting instead of acting." Marcus shook his head. "Faith is choosing to act without knowing the ending." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "And what about us?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "I don't know the ending, but I know the path." For once, Sabrina let herself be still. She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest. Red Hollow would remember them not as a preacher and a rebel, but as two souls who refused to bow to injustice alone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.